The night Eleanor Hayes arrived at Black Hollow Ranch, three armed men stood in the yard waiting to kill her new husband. She didn't know Wade Mercer yet, didn't know if he deserved saving, but when the first gunshot cracked through the frozen air and her children screamed behind her, she understood one terrible truth. She'd traded one kind of death for another. The frontier doesn't forgive mistakes, and marrying a stranger might have been her last one. If you want to see how a widow with nothing but desperation survives the most brutal winter of her life, stay until the end. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Eleanor's story travels. And if you think she's got what it takes to make it through what's coming, hit that like button. Now let's begin. The wagon hit another frozen rut, and Eleanor's daughter whimpered against her shoulder. 7 years old, and Clara hadn't spoken a full sentence since her father died. Just small sounds, little gasps of fear or discomfort that broke Eleanor's heart every single time. "Almost there," Eleanor whispered, though she had no idea if that was true. Her son Thomas, barely 9, sat across from them with his thin arms wrapped around his chest. His coat was too small. Everything they owned was too small, too worn, too broken. Just like Eleanor herself. The driver, a man named Hutchins who'd been paid in advance to bring them to Black Hollow Ranch, hadn't said 10 words since they left the trading post that morning. He just drove, his face hard as the ice forming on his beard. Eleanor pulled the blanket tighter around Claire's shoulders and tried not to think about what she was doing. Tried not to calculate the insanity of traveling 300 miles into territory she'd never seen to marry a man she'd never met. A man whose only communication had been a single letter written in handwriting so rough it looked angry. "You need a husband. I need help on the ranch. Bring the children. We'll manage." That was it. No promises, no kindness, just brutal frontier logic that matched the brutal frontier winter that had killed Eleanor's first husband. David had been a good man, gentle. He tried farming in Kansas and failed, tried clerking in Missouri and got cheated, tried logging in Wisconsin and got sick. When the fever took him last January, he'd looked at Eleanor with such guilt in his eyes, like dying was just one more thing he'd done wrong. "I'm sorry," he'd whispered. "I'm so sorry." Eleanor had held his hand and lied. "It's all right. We'll be all right." But they wouldn't be. A widow with 2 children and $43 had maybe 6 weeks before starvation, or worse. So when Martha Kinney at the boarding house mentioned knowing a rancher out west who'd written asking if any decent woman needed a situation, Eleanor had swallowed her pride and written back. She hadn't told Wade Mercer she was desperate, hadn't mentioned the landlord threatening to put them out, or the way men looked at her now that she was alone. She'd just written that she was a widow, capable, willing to work, and had 2 children who wouldn't be trouble. His response came 3 weeks later. "Come before the snow gets worse. I'll meet you in Black Hollow. We'll marry at the ranch. No courtship, no questions about what she looked like or whether she could cook, or if her children were healthy. Just instructions, like she was another piece of equipment he'd ordered." Eleanor should have been insulted. Instead, she'd been relieved. A man who wanted help more than romance was a man who might not notice when she couldn't be what wives were supposed to be. Might not care that grief had carved out parts of her she wasn't sure would ever grow back. The wagon lurched again, and Thomas grabbed the side rail to keep from falling. "How much longer?" His voice cracked, caught between boy and something harder. "Don't know, son." "It's getting dark." Eleanor looked up. He was right. The sky was turning that particular shade of gray that meant sunset was maybe an hour away. And the temperature was dropping. She could feel it through her coat, through her dress, straight into her bones. "Mr. Hutchins?" She leaned forward. "How far to the ranch?" "Another hour, maybe more if the road's bad." "Will we make it before full dark?" He shrugged. "Probably. Probably." Eleanor closed her eyes. She'd been hearing that word for 2 years now. Probably have enough money, probably find work, probably survive the winter. David used to say it all the time, right up until he was dying. The road, if you could call it that, narrowed as they climbed into rougher country. Pine trees pressed close on both sides, their branches heavy with old snow. Everything smelled like ice and wood smoke and something else Eleanor couldn't name. Something wild. "Mama?" Claire's whisper was so quiet Eleanor almost missed it. "What, sweetheart?" "Are there bears?" "Not in winter, baby. They're sleeping." What about wolves? Eleanor didn't answer that. She'd heard wolves every night since they'd crossed into the territories. Their howling carried for miles across the frozen ground, lonely and hungry and looking for anything weak. Thomas was staring at the trees. I heard him say Wade Mercer shot a man once. Who said that? Mr. Hutchins, back at the trading post. He was talking to another man, said Wade Mercer killed someone in a fight over land. Eleanor's stomach tightened. You shouldn't repeat gossip. It wasn't gossip. The other man said he saw it happen. Said Mercer broke the man's neck with his bare hands and nobody did anything because the man had it coming. Thomas, I'm just saying we don't know him. We don't know what he is. Eleanor wanted to argue, wanted to tell her son that people didn't break each other's necks, that civilized men didn't kill with their hands, that she wouldn't have brought them here if it wasn't safe. But she'd already told too many lies. We'll find out soon enough, she said instead. The trees opened up as they climbed higher, giving way to rocky slopes and frozen grassland. In the distance, mountains rose like broken teeth against the darkening sky. Eleanor had never seen mountains before. They were bigger than she'd imagined, bigger and colder and more indifferent. There, Hutchins pointed with his chin. Eleanor followed his gesture and saw buildings clustered in a shallow valley, maybe 2 miles ahead. Dark shapes against darker ground. No lights, no smoke that she could see, just structures that looked like they'd been dropped there and forgotten. That's Black Hollow? That's it? Looks dead. Most of the year it is. Ranches spread out too far for much of a town. Few buildings, trading post, nothing else worth mentioning. Where's the ranch? Past the town. Another 3 miles up the canyon. You'll see it when we get closer. Clara pressed against Eleanor's side. I don't like it here. It's just new, sweetheart. No. Clara's voice was small but certain. It's bad. Thomas shot Eleanor a look that said he agreed, but Eleanor ignored them both. Bad or not, this was what they had now. There was no money for another plan, no time for second thoughts. The wagon rattled through Black Hollow just as the last light died. Eleanor caught glimpses of a trading post with a crooked sign, a livery stable that looked abandoned, and maybe 4 or 5 other buildings she couldn't identify in the gloom. No people, no movement, just empty structures and frozen mud. Cheerful place, Eleanor muttered. Hutchins almost smiled. Folks keep to themselves out here. Winters are hard. People get mean when they're cold and hungry. Are they always cold and hungry? Mostly. The road climbed again, following a frozen creek into a narrow canyon. The walls rose steep on both sides, blocking out what little light remained. Eleanor could barely see 20 feet in any direction. Then the canyon opened up, and she saw the ranch. Black Hollow Ranch sat at the base of a rock wall like something built to withstand a siege. The main house was 2 stories of rough timber and stone with a steep roof designed to shed snow. Outbuildings clustered around it, barn, bunkhouse, smokehouse, equipment sheds. Everything looked functional and brutal and completely without warmth. But what caught Eleanor's attention were the men. 3 of them stood in the yard between the house and the barn. They weren't working, they weren't moving, they were just standing there in the near dark, waiting, and they were armed. Eleanor saw rifles, saw gun belts, saw the way they spread out as the wagon approached, not welcoming, but positioning. Mr. Hutchins, I see them. Why are they? Don't know, but I'm stopping here. You'll walk the rest. What? It's 50 yards to the house, and I'm not driving into the middle of whatever this is. Hutchins pulled the wagon to a halt 30 feet from the men. You hired me to bring you to Black Hollow Ranch. This is it. Rest is your business. Eleanor stared at him. You're not even going to No, ma'am, I'm not. He wouldn't look at her. Get your things and get down. Clara whimpered. Thomas had gone pale. Eleanor wanted to argue, wanted to scream that she'd paid him to deliver them safely, not dump them in the dark with armed strangers watching. But the set of Hutchins' jaw told her it wouldn't matter. She climbed down from the wagon, legs shaking from cold and fear. Thomas followed, then turned to help Clara. Their breath came out in white clouds that disappeared into the freezing air. The bags, Eleanor said. Hutchins tossed their 3 pathetic bags into the snow without a word. Then he turned the wagon around and drove away, the sound of wheels and hooves fading until Eleanor could hear nothing but wind and her own heartbeat. The three men hadn't moved. Eleanor picked up two of the bags. Thomas grabbed the third. Clara clutched Eleanor's skirt with both hands. "Stay close," Eleanor whispered. They walked toward the house, toward the armed men who watched them come with expressions Eleanor couldn't read in the darkness. She was 15 feet away when one of them spoke. "That's far enough." Eleanor stopped. "I'm looking for Wade Mercer." "Why?" "He's expecting me." "Is he now?" The man stepped forward. He was older than Eleanor had thought, maybe 50, with a gray beard and eyes that caught what little light remained. "Boss didn't mention expecting anyone. My name is Eleanor Hayes. Mr. Mercer and I have been corresponding. He asked me to come before the snow got worse." The man studied her. "You're the widow?" "Yes." "With the kids?" "Yes." "Boss said you weren't coming till spring." Eleanor's stomach dropped. "What?" "Said in his last letter you'd changed your mind, decided to wait for better weather." "I never wrote that. I never—" Eleanor felt everything sliding sideways. "I sent a letter 3 weeks ago saying we were coming. He should have received it." "Well, he didn't, or if he did, he didn't mention it." The man glanced at his companions. "What do you want to do with them, then?" "I don't know. Boss went to check the north fence. Won't be back till late." Clara started crying. Quiet, broken sounds that cut through Eleanor like knives. "Please," Eleanor said, and hated how her voice shook. "We've traveled for 8 days. We have nowhere else to go. If there's been some mistake with the letters, we can sort it out when Mr. Mercer returns. But my children are freezing and—" "You hear that?" The man who'd spoken first went silent. They all did. Eleanor listened and heard it too. Hoofbeats. Multiple horses. Coming fast. The three men moved instantly, rifles coming up. One of them pushed Eleanor toward the house. "Get inside." "What's happening?" "Just go." Eleanor grabbed Clara and Thomas and ran for the porch. Behind her she heard the men spreading out, heard the metallic sound of rifles being cocked, heard one of them swear. She made it to the porch steps when the riders came around the barn. 6 of them, maybe 7. Dark shapes on dark horses with faces hidden by hats and scarves. They spread across the yard in a loose line, blocking the way back to the canyon. Eleanor froze on the steps, her children pressed against her. "Well now." One of the riders walked his horse forward. His voice was smooth, educated, wrong for this place. "Looks like Wade's got visitors." "Turn around, Boone." The gray-bearded man's voice was flat. "You got no business here." "I got business anywhere I please. This is open range. This is Wade Mercer's land, and you know it. For now." The rider, Boone, turned his horse slightly, looking directly at Eleanor. "Who's the woman?" Nobody answered. "I asked a question." "None of your concern." "Everything involving Wade Mercer is my concern, especially when he starts bringing in outsiders." Boone's horse took another step forward. "You as woman?" Eleanor couldn't speak, could barely breathe. "I said, she's nobody." The gray-bearded man moved to block Boone's line of sight. "Just passing through. With children? In the dark? Don't insult me, Garrett." Garrett. So that was the gray-bearded man's name. "Last time, Boone. Turn around and leave." "Or what? You'll shoot me?" Boone laughed. "You're 3 men against 7, and Wade's not here to save you." Eleanor saw Garrett's hands tighten on his rifle, saw the other 2 men shift their positions, saw Boone's riders spreading out wider. This was going to be a fight, right here, right now, and her children were in the middle of it. Eleanor did the only thing she could think of. She stepped down from the porch and walked straight toward the men. "Eleanor." Thomas grabbed for her, but she pulled away. "Stay on the porch." "Mama, shh." "Stay." She walked past Garrett, past the other 2 men whose names she didn't know, and stopped 10 feet from Boone's horse. Up close she could see him better. Mid-40s, well-dressed for the frontier, expensive coat, good boots, a face that might have been handsome if it wasn't twisted with cruelty. "Well," Boone looked her up and down like she was livestock. "Aren't you a surprise?" "My name is Eleanor Hayes. I came here to marry Wade Mercer." "Did you now?" "Yes. We've been corresponding for months. He invited me here, and I came. That's all. There's no mystery, No intrigue. Just a widow looking for a situation and a rancher looking for help. Boone studied her. You seem smarter than that. Then what? Than marrying a man like Wade Mercer. He leaned forward in his saddle. Did he tell you what he is? What he's done? That's between him and me. Is it? Because when you marry a man, his enemies become your enemies. His debts become your debts. His sins, Boone smiled. Well, those you'll carry forever. Eleanor felt ice spreading through her chest, but she kept her voice steady. Is there something specific you want, Mr. Boone? Or did you ride up here just to frighten women and children? The smile disappeared. Careful. I've traveled 300 miles with 2 children and $40 to my name. I've buried a husband and lost everything I owned. I've been cold and hungry and desperate for longer than I care to remember. Eleanor took a step closer. So whatever you think you can threaten me with, I promise you I've already survived worse. For 5 long seconds, nobody moved. Then Boone laughed. Actually laughed. Well, Wade, he said to the darkness, you might have picked a good one this time. He turned his horse and gestured to his men. They followed him back across the yard, past the barn, and into the canyon. The sound of hoofbeats faded slowly, replaced by wind and the creak of frozen wood. Eleanor stood perfectly still until she couldn't hear them anymore. Then her legs gave out. Garrett caught her before she hit the ground. Easy, you're all right. My children, they're fine, Charlie's got them. Eleanor looked up and saw one of the other men kneeling on the porch with Clara and Thomas. They looked terrified but unhurt. What did I just do? Eleanor's voice came out shaking. Something stupid and brave in equal measure. Garrett helped her stand. You really Wade's woman? I'm supposed to be. We were supposed to marry, but if he didn't get my letter, he got it. Eleanor blinked. What? He got it. He's just particular about sharing information. Probably didn't mention it because he wanted to see if you'd actually show up. Garrett picked up one of Eleanor's bags. Come on, let's get you inside before you freeze. The house was warmer than Eleanor expected, but still cold by any reasonable standard. A fire burned in a massive stone fireplace that dominated one wall of the main room. Garrett added wood while Charlie, younger, maybe 30, with nervous hands, heated coffee. The third man had disappeared into another part of the house without speaking. Eleanor sat at a rough table with Clara on her lap, and Thomas pressed against her side. Neither child would let go. Here, Charlie set tin cups in front of them. The coffee was so strong it was almost black, but it was hot, and Eleanor drank it gratefully. Thank you. Sure, Charlie wouldn't meet her eyes. You really marry Wade? That was the arrangement. And you came anyway. Eleanor set down her cup. Is there something wrong with Mr. Mercer that I should know about? Garrett and Charlie exchanged looks. He's hard, Garrett said finally. Harder than most. He doesn't talk much. Doesn't trust easy. Keeps to himself even when he shouldn't. And the man he killed? Both men went still. My son overheard someone talking, Eleanor said, about Wade Mercer breaking a man's neck in a fight. That ain't exactly, Charlie started, but Garrett cut him off. It happened 3 years back. A man named Preston tried to burn Wade's cattle out of spite over a grazing dispute. Wade caught him at it. They fought. Preston died. And nobody arrested him? Frontier justice is different than city justice, ma'am. Preston was caught red-handed destroying another man's property. Could have killed the stock. Could have spread and burned the whole valley. Judge and Helena said it was self-defense and settled it there. Eleanor absorbed that. Is Wade Mercer a violent man? He's a careful man, Garrett said. But when someone pushes him, he pushes back twice as hard. That's how you survive out here. You make sure people know the cost of crossing you. And this Boone person, he's trying to cross him? Silas Boone wants this ranch. Wants the whole valley if he can get it. He's been buying up small operations for years, squeezing people out. Wade's the last big holdout, and Boone's been trying to break him for going on 2 years now. How? Every way he can think of. Cuts off access to water, spreads rumors in town, bribes suppliers, sends men to harass the workers. Garrett's jaw tightened. It's gonna come to blood eventually. Question is when. Clara whimpered and Eleanor held her tighter. Maybe I shouldn't have come, she whispered. Maybe not, Garrett agreed. But you're here now, and Wade doesn't quit once he started something. If he agreed to marry you, he'll go through with it, for better or worse. The door opened. Eleanor turned and saw the third man, the one who'd disappeared earlier, standing in the doorway. "Boss is back," he said. Eleanor stood slowly. Clara clung to her neck. Thomas grabbed her hand. "Where is he, Ba?" "Barn. Wants to see you alone." "I'm not leaving my children. They'll be safe here. Charlie will watch them." Eleanor looked at Charlie, who nodded reluctantly. "I don't want you to go, Mama," Clara whispered. "I'll be right back, sweetheart. I promise." She pried Clara's hands off and set her in the chair. Thomas looked like he wanted to argue, but Eleanor shook her head. He sat down next to his sister and put his arm around her shoulders. "If I'm not back in 10 minutes... Eleanor looked at Garrett. "You'll be back?" Eleanor wasn't sure if that was reassurance or threat. She followed the third man outside anyway. The cold hit like a fist. Eleanor's breath frosted immediately. The yard was dark except for a single lantern hanging outside the barn. It swung in the wind, throwing shadows everywhere. The third man pointed at the barn and walked away without another word. Eleanor crossed the yard alone. The barn door was open. Inside, she could smell hay and leather and horse sweat. A lantern hung from a post near the back, illuminating a figure standing beside a huge black horse. Eleanor stopped in the doorway. "Mr. Mercer?" The figure turned. Wade Mercer was bigger than Eleanor had imagined. Not fat, just solid, built like the mountains around them. Broad shoulders, thick arms, hands that looked like they could break bones. He didn't speak, just looked at her with eyes that caught the lantern light and gave nothing back. Eleanor forced herself to walk closer. "I'm Eleanor Hayes. We've been—" "I know who you are." His voice was rough, deep, controlled. "I apologize for arriving unannounced. I sent a letter explaining when we'd be coming, but—" "I got the letter." Eleanor stopped. "Then why did your men say—" "I didn't tell them. Didn't think you'd actually show up." "Why wouldn't I?" Wade turned back to his horse, running a brush down its flank with steady strokes. "Most women change their minds once they understand what this place is." "I knew what it was." "Did you?" He didn't look at her. "Cold, isolated, dangerous. A man you never met, a valley full of people who will hate you for being an outsider." "I knew." "Then you're either desperate or stupid." Eleanor's hands tightened into fists. "Probably both." Wade almost smiled. Almost. He set down the brush and faced her fully. In the lantern light, Eleanor could see his features clearly for the first time. Strong jaw, scarred eyebrow, a nose that had been broken at least once. He looked exactly like what he was, a man built by violence and hard work in equal measure. "Garrett said you faced down Boone tonight." "I didn't face him down. I just talked to him." "Garrett said you walked right up to his horse and told him you'd survived worse than him." "I was trying to keep people from getting shot." "That's not how Boone will see it. He'll see it as you making him look weak in front of his men." Wade's expression didn't change. "You painted a target on yourself your first night here. I was trying to protect my children. Your children wouldn't need protecting if you'd stayed wherever you came from." The words landed like stones. Eleanor felt something crack inside her chest. "If you don't want us here, just say so. We'll leave in the morning. I'll find work somewhere else. You'll freeze to death before you make it to Helena." Wade picked up a saddle and hung it on the wall with easy strength. "I sent for you. You came. We had an agreement. That was before you decided I was desperate or stupid." "I didn't say you weren't also useful." Wade finally looked at her directly. "Can you cook?" "Yes." "So?" "Yes." "Handle livestock?" "I grew up on a farm in Ohio. I know my way around cattle and chickens and pigs." "Can you shoot?" Eleanor hesitated. "My father taught me." "That's not what I asked." "Yes, I can shoot." Wade nodded slowly. "All right then, you'll work. You'll help run the house and the ranch. You'll teach your children to pull their weight. In exchange, you'll have a roof and food and protection." "And marriage?" "We'll marry when you're ready. No rush." "That's very generous." Wade's eyes narrowed. "You being sarcastic?" "No, I'm just surprised. Most men in your position would—" "Most men aren't in my position. I don't need a wife. I need help." If marriage is part of that arrangement, fine. If not, he shrugged. We'll figure something else out. Eleanor didn't know what to say. She'd expected demands, expected assumptions about what being a wife meant. Instead, Wade Mercer was offering something that sounded almost like partnership. All right, she said finally. All right? Yes, I'll work. I'll help. My children will pull their weight, and when we're both ready, we'll marry. Wade studied her for a long moment. Then he held out his hand. Eleanor took it. His grip was exactly what she'd expected, rough, strong, and utterly controlled, like everything else about him. One more thing, Wade said. Yes? Boone's going to come after you now, not tonight. Maybe not tomorrow, but soon. He'll see you as a way to hurt me, and he won't hesitate to use it. What should I do? Learn the land. Learn the people. Learn who you can trust and who you can't. Wade released her hand. And stay close to the house until I say otherwise. That sounds like I'm a prisoner. That sounds like I'm trying to keep you alive. There's a difference. Eleanor wanted to argue, wanted to say she hadn't traveled 300 miles to hide inside, but Claire's face flashed through her mind, terrified and silent on the porch, and she swallowed her pride. All right. Wade nodded and turned back to his horse. Eleanor stood there, unsure if she was dismissed or if there was something else she should say. Your children, Wade said without looking at her. The girl doesn't talk? Not since her father died. And the boy? He's frightened. They both are. Tell them fear's smart out here. It's what keeps you breathing. Wade ran his hand down the horse's neck. But don't let them freeze up. Frozen gets you killed just as fast as reckless. I'll remember that. Eleanor turned to leave. Eleanor. She stopped. You did well tonight. Stupid, like I said, but, well, it wasn't comfort, wasn't kindness. But coming from Wade Mercer, it felt close enough. Eleanor walked back to the house alone. Inside, Clara and Thomas were sitting exactly where she'd left them. Garrett had added more wood to the fire. Charlie was cleaning rifles at the table. The third man was nowhere to be seen. Well? Garrett asked. We're staying. Wade agree to that? Yes. Garrett nodded slowly. Charlie, show them to the upstairs room. The one with the good stove. That's Wade's mother's. She's been dead 8 years. I think she'll understand. Charlie led them up a narrow staircase to a room that was barely furnished but blessedly warm. A small stove in the corner radiated heat, 2 beds with worn blankets, a window overlooking the yard. Privy's out back, Charlie said. Water pumps by the kitchen. Breakfast is at dawn, whether you're awake or not. Thank you. Charlie nodded and left. Eleanor helped Clara into one bed and Thomas into the other. They were both asleep within minutes, exhausted by travel and terror. Eleanor sat between the beds and let herself shake. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. Brought her children 300 miles into nowhere and somehow convinced a stranger to let them stay. Now all she had to do was survive whatever came next. Outside, wind howled through the canyon. Somewhere in the distance, wolves answered. Eleanor pulled the blankets tighter around her children and tried not to think about the look in Silas Boone's eyes when he'd ridden away, or the way Wade Mercer's hands had moved with such careful control while he brushed his horse, or the fact that she'd just committed herself and her family to a place where violence was expected and trust was earned through blood. She'd wanted survival instead of comfort. She had a terrible feeling she was about to get exactly that. Eleanor woke to the sound of men arguing in the yard below. The sky outside was still dark, maybe an hour before dawn, but voices carried clear through the frozen air. Don't care what Wade said. We're short 3 hands and the cattle need moving before. Then move them yourself, Garrett. I'm not risking my neck for animals that'll probably freeze anyway. Clara stirred beside her. Thomas was already awake, sitting up in bed with his eyes fixed on the window. Stay here, Eleanor whispered. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and went downstairs. The main room was empty except for the dying fire. Through the front window, she could see 4 men standing near the barn, Garrett and Charlie and 2 others she didn't recognize. Eleanor opened the door. The cold slammed into her like a wall, but she stepped onto the porch anyway. Morning, Garrett said without looking at her. Didn't mean to wake you. You didn't? What's wrong? Nothing you need to worry about. If men are arguing in my yard before sunrise, I'd say I have cause to worry. One of the strangers, a thin man with a scarred face, laughed. Your yard? You been here one night, lady, and I'll be here a lot longer if everyone would stop treating me like decoration. Eleanor descended the steps. What's the problem? Garrett sighed. We've got 40 head of cattle in the north pasture that need moving to lower ground before the next storm hits. Problem is, we're down to 5 men counting Wade, and 2 of them are threatening to quit. Why? The scarred man spat into the snow. Because Boone's offering better wages, and nobody wants to die defending Wade Mercer's pride. Pete, Garrett's voice held warning. What? It's true. You know it's true. Wade's got enemies lining up to take him down, and we're supposed to stand here and bleed for him? For what? $12 a month and the privilege of getting shot? Eleanor looked at Pete directly. Did Wade Mercer do something to earn those enemies, or are they just greedy men trying to steal what isn't theirs? Doesn't matter which. Dead is dead either way. It matters to me, and if you're the kind of man who runs when things get hard, then Wade's better off without you. Pete's face darkened. Listen here. No, you listen. I've been here one night, like you said, but in that one night, I've seen men with guns show up in the dark, and I've watched Wade Mercer's people hold the line instead of running. If you can't do the same, then take Boone's money and go. But don't stand here pretending it's about safety when it's really about courage. The silence that followed was broken only by wind. Then Pete laughed, sharp and bitter. You got spine, I'll give you that, but spine doesn't stop bullets. Neither does running. Pete stared at her for another few seconds, then shook his head and walked toward the bunkhouse. The other stranger followed without a word. Garrett watched them go, then turned to Eleanor. You just made that worse. Did I? Pete's been here 3 years. He knows the land, knows the work. Now he's going to quit for sure, and we can't afford to lose him. If he was going to quit anyway, what difference does it make? The difference is, he might have stayed if you hadn't pushed him. Eleanor felt heat rising in her chest. I didn't come here to watch men argue about whether doing their jobs is worth the risk. If Wade Mercer needs help, then help him. If not, leave. But don't waste time complaining about it. Charlie coughed into his hand, trying to hide a smile. Garrett's expression didn't change. You always this direct? Only when I'm tired and cold and don't have patience for nonsense. Well, you're going to need patience if you plan to survive here. People in this valley don't take kindly to outsiders telling them how to think. Then they shouldn't think stupid things. This time Charlie actually laughed out loud. Garrett shook his head, but something in his face had softened. Wade's going to have his hands full with you. Wade knew what he was getting. I didn't hide who I am. Fair enough. Garrett gestured toward the house. Kitchen's through that door on the left. Coffee's probably cold by now, but there's bread and some dried meat if you're hungry. Wade wants everyone fed and ready to work by sunrise. What about my children? Bring them down. Charlie will keep an eye on them while we're moving cattle. I can help with the cattle. Both men looked at her like she'd suggested flying. Ma'am, Charlie started, I grew up on a farm. I've moved livestock before. Not in mountains, not in winter, not with the chance of Boone's men showing up to cause trouble. Then teach me what I need to know. I'm not sitting inside while everyone else works. Garrett exchanged a look with Charlie. Wade's not going to like this. Wade needs hands. I'm offering mine. You got children to look after. And they'll be safer if this ranch survives than if it collapses because you're too stubborn to accept help. Garrett was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. All right. But you do exactly what I say, when I say it. No arguing, no improvising. You put yourself or anyone else at risk, I'm sending you back to the house. Understood? Understood. And if Wade asks, this was your idea. It was my idea. Then we're agreed. Garrett turned toward the barn. Get your children fed and settled with Charlie. We leave in 30 minutes. Eleanor went back inside and found Clara and Thomas huddled near the fireplace. She built up the fire, found the kitchen Garrett had mentioned, and managed to put together something that resembled breakfast from what little food she could find. The cupboards were nearly bare. A few tins of beans. Some flour that might have been fresh 6 months ago. Dried meat that was more leather than food. No vegetables, no fruit, no milk or eggs or butter. Eleanor stared at the empty shelves and felt worry settle into her bones. This wasn't just sparse. It was desperate. The kind of empty that meant people were already going hungry. Mama? Thomas appeared in the doorway. What's wrong? Nothing, sweetheart, just taking stock of what we have. Doesn't look like much. It's enough for now. Eleanor handed him a piece of bread and some meat. Take this to your sister. Then both of you stay with Charlie while I'm gone. Where are you going? To help move the cattle. Thomas's eyes went wide. You can't. Why not? Because you're... He stopped. Because I'm what? Because you're our mother. If something happens to you, Eleanor knelt down so they were eye to eye. Nothing's going to happen to me. I'm going to help move some cows from one pasture to another. That's all. But that man last night, Boone, he said, Boone says a lot of things. Most of them are designed to scare people. Don't let him scare you. I'm already scared. Eleanor pulled him close. He was shaking. I know. I'm scared too. But we're going to be all right. How do you know? Because we don't have a choice. We're here now. This is our home. And we're going to make it work no matter what. Thomas didn't look convinced, but he nodded and took the food back to Clara. Eleanor changed into the warmest clothes she had, which weren't warm enough, and went outside. Dawn was breaking over the mountains, turning the snow pale pink. The temperature had dropped even further. Her breath came out in thick clouds. Garrett was saddling horses near the barn. Charlie stood nearby with Pete and the other man whose name Eleanor still didn't know. Wade was nowhere to be seen. He's already up at the pasture, Garrett said, reading her expression. Left an hour ago to scout the route. Eleanor nodded and accepted the horse Garrett offered. It was a large mare with patient eyes and a coat thick enough to withstand the cold. Her name's Bess, Garrett said. She's steady, won't spook easy. Just give her head and she'll follow the others. Eleanor climbed into the saddle. Her muscles screamed. She hadn't ridden in years, but she ignored the pain. They rode out as the sun cleared the canyon wall. The north pasture was 3 miles up a narrow trail that climbed steep and fast. Eleanor's legs burned within the first mile. By the second, she could barely feel her fingers despite her gloves. But she didn't complain, didn't ask to slow down, just kept Bess moving and tried not to think about how far the ground was below them. They found Wade standing beside a fence line, looking down at a cluster of cattle in the ravine below. He didn't acknowledge their arrival, just kept staring at the animals like he was calculating something. How many? Garrett asked. 38. Lost 2 to the cold last night. Damn. Could be worse. If we don't move them today, we'll lose more. Wade finally turned and saw Eleanor. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. What's she doing here? Helping, Eleanor said before Garrett could answer. You need hands. I have 2. Either use them or tell me to leave, but don't waste time debating it. Wade looked at Garrett. This your idea? Hers? And you let her come anyway. Didn't see the harm? The harm is if Boone's men show up and there's a woman in the middle of it. Then we'd better move fast, Eleanor said. Wade stared at her. Eleanor stared back. Finally, Wade shook his head. Fine, but you stay in the middle of the group. Don't range out. Don't try to be a hero. Just keep the cattle moving and don't get yourself killed. Understood. They worked for 3 hours straight, moving the cattle down from the ravine and along the narrow trail toward lower pasture. It was brutal work. The animals didn't want to move. The trail was icy. Twice, cattle slipped and nearly went over the edge before Wade roped them back to safety. Eleanor's hands were bleeding inside her gloves. Her face felt like frozen leather. But she kept moving, kept pushing the cattle forward, kept doing exactly what Garrett told her to do. Around noon, they stopped to rest the horses. Wade rode up beside Eleanor while she was checking Bess's hooves. You're hurt. Eleanor looked down at her gloves. Blood had soaked through the wool. It's fine. It's not fine. You're going to get frostbite. I said it's fine. Wade dismounted and pulled off his own gloves. They were thick leather, lined with fur. He handed them to Eleanor. Take them. What about your hands? I've got spare. You don't. Eleanor wanted to argue, but her fingers were starting to go numb. She accepted the gloves and pulled them on. They were too big, but they were warm. Thank you. Wade nodded and mounted his horse again. You did well this morning, he said without looking at her. I did what needed doing. Most people wouldn't have. Most people aren't desperate enough. Wade almost smiled. Maybe that's what this place needs. More desperate people. He rode away before Eleanor could respond. They reached the lower pasture by mid-afternoon. The cattle spread out across the frozen grass, looking for whatever food they could find beneath the snow. It wasn't much, but it was better than the ravine. Garrett counted heads while Charlie and Pete checked the fence line. 36, Garrett announced. Lost 2 more on the trail. Wade's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. Could have been worse, Garrett added. Could have been better. They rode back to the ranch in silence. Eleanor's entire body ached. Her hands throbbed despite Wade's gloves. Her legs felt like they'd been beaten. But she'd done it. She'd actually done it. When they reached the yard, Charlie helped her down from Bess. Her legs nearly gave out. Easy, Charlie said. First day's always the hardest. How many more days? Of moving cattle. Probably another week. We've got 3 more pastures to clear before the big storm hits. Eleanor wanted to cry. Instead, she thanked Charlie and limped toward the house. Clara and Thomas were sitting at the kitchen table with a woman Eleanor had never seen before. She was maybe 60, gray-haired, with a face that looked like it had been carved from the same stone as the mountains. You must be Eleanor, the woman said. I'm Ruth. I run the trading post in town. Eleanor shook her hand. Ruth's grip was firm and assessing. Your children said you were moving cattle. Yes, in winter, on your 2nd day here. The cattle needed moving. Ruth studied her for a long moment. Then she smiled, just a little. Well, maybe you'll last longer than the others. Others? Wade's had 3 women come through in the past 5 years. First one left after 2 weeks. Second one made it a month. Third one, Ruth's smile disappeared. She didn't leave. Boone's men found her on the road to Helena. Apparently she'd decided to walk rather than stay another day. Eleanor felt ice spreading through her chest. What happened to her? Died of exposure about 10 miles from here. They brought her body back and Wade buried her next to his mother. Clara had gone pale. Thomas was staring at the table. Why are you telling me this? Eleanor asked quietly. Because you should know what you're dealing with. Wade Mercer isn't a bad man, but he's a hard one. And this land is harder. Women don't survive here unless they're tougher than the men, smarter than the danger, and more stubborn than common sense. I'm all of those things. Are you? Ruth stood. I brought some supplies, flour, beans, salt. Not much, but it should help. Charlie said your cupboards were bare. They are. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'm putting it on Wade's account, and his credit's already stretched thin. Boone's been paying suppliers not to sell to him. Half the merchants in the territory won't touch Wade's money anymore. Eleanor's stomach sank. How is he surviving? Barely. He's been selling off equipment, trading labor for goods, doing whatever he can to keep the ranch running. Ruth pulled on her coat. If you're smart, you'll convince him to sell to Boone and move somewhere else. This valley isn't worth dying for. Wade doesn't seem like the type to quit. No, he doesn't. Ruth looked at Clara and Thomas. Which means everyone around him suffers for his pride. Keep that in mind. She left without another word. Eleanor stood in the kitchen, staring at the small sack of supplies Ruth had brought. It wasn't enough, not even close. Maybe a week's worth of food if they rationed carefully. Mama? Claire's voice was so quiet, Eleanor almost missed it. Yes, sweetheart. I don't like it here. I know. Can we leave? Eleanor knelt beside Clara's chair. Where would we go? Anywhere. Back to Missouri, back to... We don't have anywhere to go back to, baby. We used all our money getting here. Then we'll find more money. How? Clara didn't have an answer. Neither did Eleanor. Thomas was watching them both with eyes too old for his face. We're stuck, aren't we? We're not stuck. Eleanor stopped. She couldn't think of a word that didn't sound like a lie. We're here, and we're going to make the best of it. What if the best isn't good enough? Eleanor didn't answer that. That night, Wade came to the house after dark. Eleanor was in the kitchen trying to make something edible from the supplies Ruth had brought. She'd managed thin soup and bread that was only half burned. Wade stood in the doorway watching her work. Ruth said she brought food. She did. Not much, but enough for now. I'll pay her back. She said your credit stretched thin. Wade's expression hardened. She say anything else? She said Boone's been paying suppliers not to sell to you, that half the merchants in the territory won't touch your money. That's about right. She also said I should convince you to sell and move somewhere else. You planning to? Eleanor turned to face him. Are you planning to sell? No? Then it doesn't matter what I think. Wade stepped into the kitchen. In the lamplight, Eleanor could see exhaustion carved into every line of his face. He looked like a man who'd been fighting for years and couldn't remember why he'd started. The woman Ruth mentioned, Eleanor said quietly. The one who died on the road to Helena. What was her name? Wade's hands clenched into fists. Sarah. Did you love her? I barely knew her. She came from St. Louis. Lasted 3 weeks before she decided she'd rather freeze to death than stay here. Why didn't you go after her? I did. Found her trail, followed it as far as I could. But the storm was too bad. By the time I found her, she was already gone. Wade's voice was flat, empty. I buried her next to my mother because I didn't know where else to put her. Eleanor felt something crack inside her chest. I'm sorry. Don't be. She made her choice. I made mine. What choice was that? To keep fighting even when it doesn't make sense, even when everyone tells me to quit, even when people die because of my pride. Wade looked at her directly. Ruth's right, you know. This valley isn't worth dying for, but it's mine, and I don't give up what's mine. Even if it kills you? Even then. They stood in silence for a long moment. The cattle we lost today, Eleanor said finally. Can the ranch afford that? No. What happens when you run out of cattle? I sell equipment, sell land, sell whatever I have to until there's nothing left. And then? Wade's smile was bitter. Then Boone wins, and I move on. You don't believe that. No, but it's the truth whether I believe it or not. Eleanor turned back to the stove. The soup's almost ready. You should eat. I'm not hungry. You're eating anyway. You can't work if you're starved. Wade looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he sat at the table and accepted the bowl Eleanor handed him. They ate in silence. The soup was terrible, too thin, too bland, but Wade finished it without complaint. When he was done, he stood and carried his bowl to the wash basin. Tomorrow morning I need to ride to the east fence line, check for damage from the storm. I'll come with you. No. Why not? Because Boone's men have been spotted near that section. It's not safe. Then it's not safe for you either. I can handle myself. So can I. Wade turned to face her. You've been here 2 days, Eleanor. You don't know this land, don't know the danger. If Boone's men corner you out there, then I'll do what I did last night. I'll talk to them. That won't work twice. Then I'll shoot them. Wade actually laughed, short and sharp. You really mean that? Yes. He studied her for a long moment. All right. You can come. But you carry a rifle, and you do exactly what I say. No arguments. Agreed. Wade nodded and left. Eleanor stood alone in the kitchen, listening to his boots on the porch steps. Outside, wind was picking up. She could hear it howling through the canyon, carrying the promise of more snow. She finished cleaning the dishes, banked the fire, and went upstairs. Claire and Thomas were already asleep, tangled together in one bed, like they used to when they were smaller. Eleanor pulled the blanket up over them and sat by the window. In the distance, she could see lights from the bunkhouse, heard men's voices carrying across the yard. Somewhere beyond the canyon, wolves were howling. She thought about Sarah, about the woman who'd walked into a blizzard rather than stay at Black Hollow Ranch one more day. Eleanor understood that impulse, the desperate need to escape, the certainty that anywhere else had to be better than here. But Eleanor also understood something Sarah apparently hadn't. There was nowhere else. No other options. No other chances. This was it. Black Hollow Ranch or nothing. And Eleanor had already survived nothing once. She wasn't eager to try it again. So she'd stay. She'd work. She'd fight if she had to. And maybe, just maybe, she'd prove Ruth wrong. Eleanor closed her eyes and let exhaustion pull her under. Outside, the wind kept howling, and somewhere in the dark, men with guns were deciding when to strike again. The fire started 3 weeks later on a night so cold, the stars looked like ice chips scattered across black velvet. Eleanor woke to the smell of smoke and Thomas shaking her shoulder. Mama, Something's burning. She was on her feet before her eyes fully opened. Through the window, she could see orange light flickering against the barn wall. Not the barn itself, something beyond it. Eleanor grabbed her coat and boots. Get Clara. Stay in this room. Lock the door. Mama, do it now. She took the stairs 2 at a time and burst into the main room. Wade was already outside. She could hear shouting from the yard. Eleanor ran onto the porch and stopped. The equipment shed was fully engulfed. Flames climbed 30 feet into the air, throwing wild shadows across the snow. Men were running with buckets, but Eleanor could see it was already too late. The building was lost. Wade stood near the barn with Garrett, both of them watching the fire with expressions that were somehow worse than anger. Eleanor grabbed a bucket from the pump and joined the line of men throwing water onto the barn's wall. Not to save the shed, that was gone, but to keep the fire from spreading. They worked for an hour. By the time the shed collapsed into glowing rubble, Eleanor's hands were raw and her lungs burned from smoke. Wade walked through the wreckage with a lantern, examining what was left. Eleanor followed. How bad? She asked. Bad. The shed had most of our spare equipment, harnesses, tools, feed for the horses. Wade kicked at a piece of charred wood. 6 months' worth of supplies. Gone. Was it an accident? Wade held up something he'd found in the ash. A bottle. Kerosene. Eleanor's blood went cold. Boone. Or his men. Doesn't matter which. Wade threw the bottle into the snow. He's escalating. We should report it. Tell the sheriff. The sheriff's in Boone's pocket. Has been for years. Reporting it would just give Boone another chance to spread lies about how we're causing trouble. So we do nothing? We survive. That's what we do. Wade walked back toward the house. Eleanor stood in the ruins of the equipment shed and felt fury building in her chest. 3 weeks she'd been here. 3 weeks of working herself half to death, moving cattle, repairing fences, trying to keep the ranch from collapsing. And now this. She found Wade in the barn checking on the horses. They were spooked but unhurt. We can't just let him destroy everything you've built, Eleanor said. Wade didn't look at her. What would you suggest? Ride into town and shoot him? That'll get me hanged. There has to be something. There isn't. This is how Boone works. He'll burn a building, kill some cattle, make life harder and harder until I can't afford to keep fighting. Then he'll offer to buy the ranch for half what it's worth, and I'll have no choice but to take it. Then we make it so you do have a choice. Wade finally turned to face her. How? Eleanor didn't have an answer yet, but standing there in the smoke-filled barn with her hands bleeding and her children terrified upstairs, she knew one thing for certain. She was done being afraid. The next morning, Eleanor rode into Black Hollow with Garrett. The town looked even more desolate in daylight, a handful of buildings clustered around a frozen crossroads like they were huddling for warmth. Ruth's trading post was the largest structure. Eleanor tied her horse outside and went in. Ruth was behind the counter, sorting through a ledger. She looked up when Eleanor entered. Heard about the fire? News travels fast. It does when Boone's men are drinking in the saloon celebrating it. Ruth closed the ledger. What do you need? Information. You said Boone's been paying suppliers not to sell to Wade. How many suppliers? Most of them within 100 miles. What about farther out? Cheyenne? Denver. Ruth's eyes narrowed. You planning to bypass the local merchants? I'm planning to find people who aren't afraid of Silas Boone. That's a short list. Then I'll work with what I have. Eleanor leaned on the counter. I need names, addresses, anyone who might be willing to trade with us. Why would they? Wade's credit is shot. He can barely pay for what he needs now, let alone what he'll need to replace what burned last night. Then we'll trade work for goods, labor for supplies, whatever it takes. Ruth studied her for a long moment. You're serious? Yes. You know this will make Boone angrier. He doesn't like people finding ways around his control. Good. I want him angry. Angry people make mistakes. Ruth almost smiled. She pulled out a different ledger and flipped through pages. There's a man in Cheyenne, Miller. He runs a freight company, used to trade with Wade before Boone scared him off. Why did he stop? Boone threatened to burn his wagons if he kept doing business with Black Hollow Ranch. Miller's got a family, couldn't risk it. What if the risk changed? What if helping Wade hurt Boone instead of helping him? How would it do that? Eleanor was quiet for a moment, thinking. Boone's power comes from controlling the valley, making people dependent on him. If we can show that his control isn't absolute, that people can resist him and survive, it weakens everything he's built. That's a theory. It's more than that. It's leverage. Ruth closed the ledger. I'll give you Miller's address, but Eleanor, be careful. Boone's not just greedy, he's vindictive, and he doesn't forgive people who cross him. Neither do I. Eleanor left with a list of names tucked inside her coat. Garrett was waiting outside, leaning against his horse. Get what you needed? Maybe. We're going to Cheyenne. Garrett straightened. Cheyenne's 3 days' ride. Wade know about this? Not yet. He's not going to like it. He doesn't have to like it. He just has to let me try. They rode back to the ranch in silence. When they arrived, Eleanor found Wade in what was left of the equipment shed, salvaging anything that hadn't burned completely. I'm going to Cheyenne, Eleanor said. Wade didn't look up. No, you're not. There's a freight company there. They used to trade with you. I'm going to convince them to start again. Miller won't deal with me. Boone made sure of that. He won't deal with you, but he might deal with me. Wade straightened, holding a partially melted piece of metal. Why would he do that? Because I'm going to offer him something Boone can't, a chance to fight back. That's not how business works. Maybe not, but it's how survival works. And right now, Miller's surviving on Boone's terms. I'm betting he's tired of it. Wade threw the metal into a pile of scrap. Even if you're right, even if Miller agrees to trade with us again, how do we pay him? We don't have money. We have cattle, equipment, land if we need to mortgage it. We have options, Wade. We just have to be willing to use them. Mortgaging land is how ranchers lose everything. Doing nothing is how you've already lost half of what you own. Eleanor stepped closer. Let me try. What's the worst that happens? Miller says no and I come back empty-handed. We're no worse off than we are now. Wade stared at her. And the best that happens? We get supplies, we get allies, we get a chance to show Boone he can't control everyone. That's optimistic. I'm desperate. Desperate looks a lot like optimistic when you don't have alternatives. Wade was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. All right, but Garrett goes with you. And you take rifles. Agreed. And if anything feels wrong, if Boone's men show up or the situation turns bad, you run. Don't try to fight. Don't try to be brave. Just run. Eleanor met his eyes. I'll be careful. That's not what I said. It's what I'm promising. They left at dawn the next day. Eleanor said goodbye to Clara and Thomas in the cold dark, holding them both close and trying not to think about Sarah walking into a blizzard. We'll be back in a week, she told them. Charlie's going to look after you. I don't want you to go, Clara whispered. I know, baby, but I have to. Thomas was trying to be brave. Eleanor could see it in the set of his jaw, the way he wouldn't quite meet her eyes. You're coming back, right? He said. Yes. Promise? Eleanor wanted to promise, wanted to give him the certainty he needed, but she'd learned not to make promises she might not be able to keep. I'm going to try, she said instead. Thomas nodded. He understood what that meant. The ride to Cheyenne was brutal. The temperature never climbed above freezing. They slept in their bedrolls under pine trees and woke covered in frost. Eleanor's hands were so cold she could barely hold the reins. But Garrett was good company. He told stories about Wade, about the younger brother who'd died, about the mother who'd built Black Hollow Ranch from nothing, about the years of fighting Boone that had worn Wade down to what he was now. He used to smile more, Garrett said on the second night. Before his brother died, before Boone started this war, he used to actually seem happy. What happened to his brother? Garrett poked at the fire with a stick. Accident. That's what the official report said. Jacob was checking fence line in the North Canyon when his horse spooked and threw him, broke his neck on the rocks. You don't believe it was an accident? I believe someone spooked that horse on purpose. Jacob was too good a rider to get thrown by chance, and the timing was too convenient, right after Wade refused to sell Boone a section of grazing land Jacob had been managing. Did Wade investigate? He tried, but there was no evidence, no witnesses, just a dead kid and a brother who blamed himself for not protecting him. Garrett threw the stick into the fire. Wade changed after that, got harder, stopped trusting people, started seeing every problem as something he had to solve alone. Is that why he sent for me? Because he finally admitted he couldn't do it alone? Maybe. Or maybe he just got tired of being lonely. They reached Cheyenne on the third day. It was a real town, bigger than anything Eleanor had seen since leaving Missouri. Actual streets, actual buildings, people moving with purpose instead of just surviving. Miller's freight company was on the east side of town, a large warehouse with wagons parked in neat rows outside. Eleanor and Garrett tied their horses and went inside. A man was working at a desk near the back, mid-50s, balding, with ink stains on his fingers. He looked up when they approached. "Help you?" "Are you Mr. Miller?" "Depends who's asking." "My name is Eleanor Hayes. I'm from Black Hollow Ranch." Miller's expression shut down immediately. "I don't do business with Wade Mercer." "I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to do business with me." "Same thing." "It's not. Wade Mercer is one man with enemies. I'm a woman trying to keep a ranch alive and children fed. There's a difference." Miller set down his pen. "Not to Silas Boone there isn't. And I told Wade years ago I can't afford to cross Boone. I've got wagons. I've got drivers. I've got a family to protect. Boone's made it clear what happens to people who help his enemies." "What if helping us hurt Boone more than it helped him?" "How would it do that?" Eleanor had been thinking about this for 3 days. Boone's power comes from control. He controls who trades with whom, who gets supplies, who survives, and who doesn't. But that control is fragile. It only works if people believe they have no other options. They don't have other options. Boone owns half the territory. He owns the merchants, the suppliers, the local businesses, but he doesn't own the routes, doesn't own the roads, doesn't own men like you who are willing to take a risk for something bigger than profit. Miller laughed. "You think I'm some kind of hero?" "No, I think you're a businessman who's tired of being bullied. I think you're smart enough to see that Boone's control won't last forever. And I think you're angry enough to want to be part of bringing him down. That's a lot of assumptions about a man you just met." "Am I wrong?" Miller stared at her. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Trade with us? Bring supplies to Black Hollow Ranch. We'll pay in cattle, equipment, whatever we have that's worth trading. And in exchange, you get to be the man who proved Boone couldn't control everything. And when Boone burns my wagons, we'll replace them." "With what? Wade's broke. Wade has land, he has cattle, he has resources Boone wants. We'll leverage those resources to protect the people who help us." Miller shook his head. "That's not a business plan. That's desperation dressed up as strategy." "You're right, but desperation is all I have." Eleanor leaned on the desk. "My children are at that ranch right now. They're cold and they're scared, and they're wondering if their mother is going to come back or if they're going to end up like every other family Boone has destroyed. I can't promise you profit. I can't promise you safety. But I can promise you that if you help us survive, we'll do everything in our power to make sure you don't regret it." Miller was quiet for a long time. Then he stood and walked to the window, looking out at his wagons. "How much do you need?" Eleanor felt hope flare in her chest. "Enough to replace what burned, feed for the livestock, tools, basic supplies to make it through winter." "That's a month's worth of goods, maybe more." "I know." "And you'll pay in cattle?" "Yes, we've got 30 head we can spare. Good stock, worth more than what we're asking for." 30 head doesn't cover a month of supplies." "Then we'll add equipment, a plow, extra harnesses, whatever you think is fair." Miller turned back to face her. "You know this is insane, right? Even if I agree, even if I bring you supplies, Boone's going to retaliate against both of us." "Probably. So why do it?" Eleanor thought about Clara, about Thomas, about Wade standing in the ruins of his equipment shed with nothing but anger and exhaustion in his eyes. "Because someone has to," she said, "and I'm too tired to wait for someone braver." Miller studied her face. Then he nodded. "All right, I'll do it, but on one condition." "What?" "When this blows up in our faces, and it will blow up, you don't blame me. You don't come crying that I should have known better. You accept that we both made a choice, and we both live with the consequences." Agreed. Miller held out his hand. Eleanor shook it. They worked out the details over the next hour. Miller would bring supplies to Black Hollow Ranch in 2 weeks. Eleanor would have the cattle ready to trade. Garrett would help coordinate the logistics. When they were done, Miller walked them outside. "You know," he said, "I had a brother once. Lost him to Boone's men 5 years ago. They burned his homestead because he wouldn't sell. He died trying to save his livestock." Eleanor felt her throat tighten. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. Just make sure this matters. Make sure his death wasn't for nothing." "I'll try." "That's all any of us can do." They rode out of Cheyenne that afternoon. Eleanor felt lighter than she had in weeks. They'd done it. They'd actually found a way to fight back. But the feeling didn't last. They were 2 hours outside of town when Garrett pulled his horse to a stop. "What's wrong?" Eleanor asked. "We're being followed." Eleanor looked back. At first she saw nothing, then movement. 3 riders maybe half a mile behind them, keeping pace. "Boone's men?" "Probably. They must have spotted us in town." Eleanor's stomach dropped. "What do we do?" "We ride. Fast." They spurred their horses forward. The landscape blurred, rocks and snow and frozen grass all running together. Eleanor's horse was fast, but not built for long distances. She could feel it tiring after the first mile. The riders behind them were getting closer. "Garrett, I see them." They crested a hill and Garrett pulled off the road, urging his horse into a cluster of rocks and pine trees. Eleanor followed. "Get down. Stay quiet." They dismounted and pressed themselves against the rocks. Eleanor's heart was hammering so hard she was sure anyone could hear it. The 3 riders came over the hill and stopped exactly where Garrett and Eleanor had left the road. One of them dismounted and examined the ground. Eleanor couldn't hear what he was saying, but she saw him point toward the rocks. "They know we're here," Eleanor whispered. Garrett had his rifle out. "Stay behind me." The men approached slowly. Eleanor could see their faces now, rough, hard, exactly what she'd expected. One of them called out, "We know you're in there. Come out peaceful. Nobody gets hurt." Garrett didn't respond. "We just want to talk. Boone wants to know what business you had in Cheyenne." Still nothing. The man sighed. "All right, hard way it is." They spread out, moving to surround the rocks. Eleanor felt panic rising in her throat. They were trapped. 3 armed men against 2, and one of them was a woman who hadn't fired a gun in years. Then Garrett did something that surprised her. He stood up, rifle lowered, hands visible. "You're right," he called out. "We don't want trouble." The men stopped. "Smart," their leader said. "Now tell us what you were doing in Cheyenne." "Trading, looking for supplies, same thing anyone does." "Supplies for Wade Mercer?" "Supplies for the ranch, yes." "Boone won't like that." "Boone doesn't own Cheyenne. We can trade wherever we want." The leader smiled. "That's where you're wrong. Boone owns everywhere that matters, and he's made it clear. Anyone helping Wade Mercer answers to him." He raised his rifle. Eleanor didn't think. She just moved. She grabbed Garrett's rifle, brought it up, and fired. The shot went wide, intentionally. Eleanor wasn't trying to hit anyone. She was trying to scare them. It worked. The men's horses spooked. One of them reared, throwing its rider. The other 2 fought for control. "Go!" Eleanor shouted. She and Garrett ran for their horses. Eleanor's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the reins, but she managed to mount. They rode. Behind them, gunshots cracked through the air. Eleanor heard bullets hitting rocks, heard men shouting, but she didn't look back. She just rode as hard as she could. They rode for miles. By the time Garrett finally slowed down, Eleanor's horse was lathered and blowing hard. "You all right?" Garrett asked. "I think so." Eleanor's voice was shaking. "Did I hit anyone?" "No, you scared them enough to give us a head start. That's what mattered." "I've never shot at a person before." "You didn't shoot at them. You shot near them. There's a difference." Garrett checked behind them. "We should keep moving. They might still be following." They rode through the night and into the next day, stopping only to rest the horses. By the time they reached Black Hollow Ranch, Eleanor was so exhausted she could barely stay in the saddle. Wade met them in the yard. One look at their faces told him something had happened. "What?" "Boone's men followed us from Cheyenne," Garrett said. "They wanted to know what we were doing there. We had to run." Wade's jaw tightened. Anyone hurt? No, Eleanor fired a warning shot, gave us time to get away. Wade looked at Eleanor. She couldn't read his expression. Did you get what you went for? Yes. Miller agreed to trade. He'll be here in 2 weeks. Wade nodded slowly. Then, without another word, he turned and walked into the house. Eleanor stood in the yard, still shaking from adrenaline and exhaustion. He's not angry, Garrett said quietly. He's scared. Scared that he's going to lose you the same way he lost everyone else. Eleanor watched Wade's retreating back. I'm not going anywhere. That's what Sarah said, too. The words hit Eleanor like a fist. She wanted to argue, wanted to say she was different, stronger, more stubborn than Sarah had been. But standing there in the frozen yard with the memory of gunshots still ringing in her ears, Eleanor wasn't sure that was true. She went inside and found her children. They were in the kitchen with Charlie, eating thin soup. When they saw Eleanor, they both ran to her. She held them and didn't let go for a long time. That night, as Eleanor lay in bed listening to her children breathe, she heard footsteps in the hall. A soft knock on the door. Come in. Wade opened the door. He stood in the doorway, backlit by lamplight from the hall. I wanted to say thank you, he said quietly, for going to Cheyenne, for taking the risk. You don't have to thank me. I did it for all of us. I know, but most people wouldn't have. Wade was quiet for a moment. Garrett said you fired at Boone's men. I fired near them. I wasn't trying to hit anyone. Still took courage. Eleanor sat up. It took desperation, same as everything else I've done since I got here. Sometimes they're the same thing. Wade stepped into the room. In the dim light, he looked younger than usual, less worn. I never thanked you for coming here, he said, for answering my letter, for bringing your children into this mess. You didn't ask me to come. I chose it. That doesn't make it less brave. Eleanor felt something shifting in her chest, something warm and unfamiliar. Wade, I'm not good at this, he interrupted, talking, saying what I mean. But I want you to know that having you here, having someone who fights instead of runs, it matters. Even if I'm desperate and stupid? Wade almost smiled, especially then. He turned to leave. Wade? He stopped. When Miller comes with the supplies, when Boone realizes we found a way around his control, it's going to get worse. You know that, right? I know. Are you ready for that? Wade looked at her directly. Are you? Eleanor thought about Clara and Thomas sleeping beside her, about the ranch that was starting to feel like home, about the man standing in her doorway who'd finally let himself hope. Yes, she said, I am. Wade nodded. Then we'll face it together. He left, closing the door quietly behind him. Eleanor lay back down and stared at the ceiling. Outside, wind howled through the canyon. Somewhere in the distance, she heard what might have been gunshots or might have been thunder. Either way, the storm was coming, and Eleanor Hayes was done running from it. Miller's wagons arrived on a morning so cold the air itself seemed frozen solid. Eleanor watched from the porch as 3 freight wagons rolled into the yard, loaded with supplies that looked like salvation wrapped in canvas. Wade was already outside talking to Miller. From the set of his shoulders, Eleanor could tell the conversation wasn't going well. She pulled on her coat and walked down to meet them. Can't accept this without payment, Wade was saying. We had an agreement. Miller shook his head. Agreement was you'd pay in cattle. But I've been thinking about it, and cattle won't do me any good if Boone burns my wagons before I can sell them. Then what do you want? Information. Miller glanced at Eleanor. Your woman convinced me to help by saying it would hurt Boone. I want to know how. Wade looked at Eleanor. She stepped forward. Boone's power comes from controlling the supply lines, she said. Every merchant who's afraid to trade with Wade strengthens that control. But if people see that his control can be broken, that someone was willing to risk helping us and survived, it creates doubt. Doubt doesn't pay my bills. No, but it weakens Boone's position, makes other people braver, and the more people who stand up to him, the less power he has. Miller rubbed his jaw. That's still theory. I need something concrete. Eleanor had been expecting this. She'd spent the past 2 weeks thinking about what Miller would really need to feel safe taking this risk. What if we gave you proof that Boone's vulnerable? She said. Something that shows his control isn't as absolute as everyone thinks. What kind of proof? I don't know yet, but I'll find it. Wade's eyes narrowed. Eleanor, give me 2 weeks, she said, still looking at Miller. 2 weeks to find something you can use, and if I can't, we'll pay you in land instead of cattle. Whatever you think is fair. Miller studied her face. You're serious? Yes. You're also crazy. Probably, but I'm here, and I'm offering you a deal. Take it or leave it. Miller looked at Wade. She always this stubborn? Since the day she arrived. All right, Miller gestured to his men. Unload the wagons. But Eleanor, I'm holding you to that deadline. 2 weeks. If you can't deliver proof that Boone's weaker than he looks, I'm taking land as payment, and I get to choose which section. Eleanor nodded. Agreed. The men spent the next hour unloading supplies. Feed for the livestock. Tools to replace what had burned. Flour, salt, beans, coffee. Things Eleanor had started to think they'd never have again. Clara and Thomas stood on the porch watching, their eyes wide. When the wagons were empty, Miller climbed back onto his seat. He looked down at Eleanor. 2 weeks, he said. Don't make me regret this. I won't. Miller snapped the reins and the wagons rolled out of the yard. Wade walked up beside Eleanor. You want to tell me what proof you're planning to find? Not yet. Eleanor, I need to think about it first. Figure out what would actually hurt Boone enough to matter. Wade's jaw tightened. Whatever you're planning, I'm going with you. No, that wasn't a request. Eleanor turned to face him. If we both leave, who protects the ranch? Garrett can't hold off Boone's men alone. Then we take Garrett with us and leave Charlie. Charlie's barely 30 and scared of his own shadow. He can't defend this place. Eleanor put her hand on Wade's arm. I know you want to help, but the best thing you can do right now is stay here and protect what we've built. Let me handle Boone. I don't like it. You don't have to like it. Wade stared at her for a long moment. Then he shook his head. You're going to get yourself killed. Maybe, but at least I'll die trying instead of waiting for Boone to pick us off piece by piece. She walked away before he could argue further. That night, Eleanor sat at the kitchen table with a piece of paper and a pencil, trying to figure out what proof Miller would actually need. What evidence would convince people that Boone was vulnerable? The answer came from an unexpected source. Thomas appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Mama, what are you doing? Thinking. About what? Eleanor almost told him to go back to bed. Then she looked at his face, intelligent, curious, older than his years, and realized he might actually be able to help. Come here, she said. Thomas sat beside her. Eleanor explained the situation, the deal with Miller, the need for proof, the deadline hanging over them. When she finished, Thomas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, What if you prove Boone did something illegal? Like what? Like burning the equipment shed, or threatening people, or whatever he did to Wade's brother. Eleanor's heart skipped. What do you know about Wade's brother? I heard Garrett talking about it. He said Boone probably killed him, but nobody could prove it. That was years ago. The trail's cold. Maybe. But if Boone did it once, he probably did other things too. Bad things. Things people might know about but are too scared to say. Eleanor stared at her son. You're right. I am? Yes. People don't talk about Boone because they're afraid. But if we could find someone willing to testify, someone who saw him do something illegal and could prove it, that would be concrete evidence. Something Miller could use. Thomas leaned forward. How do you find someone like that? I don't know yet, but I'm going to figure it out. The next morning, Eleanor rode into Black Hollow alone. Ruth was behind the counter at the trading post, same as always. Back again? Ruth said when Eleanor walked in. I need your help. That seems to be a common theme with you. Eleanor ignored the sarcasm. I need to know who in this valley has been hurt by Boone, who's lost something because of him, who might be angry enough to talk. Ruth's expression went carefully neutral. That's a dangerous question. I know. Why are you asking it? Eleanor explained about Miller, about the deadline, about the need for proof. When she finished, Ruth was quiet for a long time. Then she locked the front door of the trading post and pulled down the shades. What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room, she said. All right. 3 years ago, Boone wanted to expand his holdings into the Eastern Valley. There was a family there, the Hutchins family, homesteaders. They'd been working that land for a decade. Eleanor felt recognition spike through her. The same Hutchins who drove me here? His brother. Name was Daniel. Good man, hard worker. He refused to sell to Boone. What happened? Ruth's face went hard. Boone's men burned his house. Daniel got his wife and 2 kids out, but he went back for their belongings. The house collapsed on him. He died trying to save a family Bible and some photographs. Eleanor's stomach turned. And nobody did anything? The sheriff ruled it an accident, said Daniel must have knocked over a lantern. Boone expressed his condolences and bought the land from Daniel's widow for a fraction of what it was worth. Ruth's hands clenched into fists. She had no choice, no money, no husband, 2 kids to feed. She took what Boone offered and left the territory. Where is she now? Don't know. She cut ties with everyone here. Too many bad memories. Eleanor thought about this. What about witnesses? Someone must have seen Boone's men near the house that night. One person did. A ranch hand named Colby. He was riding past the Hutchins place and saw 3 men leaving right before the fire started. He recognized one of them, a man named Pike who works for Boone. Eleanor's pulse quickened. Where's Colby now? Working at a ranch about 40 miles north. He left Black Hollow a month after Daniel died. Said he couldn't stay in a place where men got away with murder. Would he testify if someone asked him directly? I don't know. He was pretty shaken up when he left. Told me he'd seen enough violence to last a lifetime. But he might. He might. Ruth unlocked the door and raised the shades. But Eleanor, even if Colby agrees to talk, even if you get proof that Boone burned the Hutchins house, what are you going to do with it? The sheriff won't act on it. The law here belongs to Boone. The law in Black Hollow does, but there's a territorial judge in Helena. If we can get Colby's testimony to him, that's a long shot. It's the only shot we have. Ruth studied her face. You're not going to give up, are you? No. Even if it gets you killed, even then. Ruth almost smiled. All right. I'll write down directions to the ranch where Colby's working, but you should know the route goes through some rough country, and Boone's men patrol that area regularly. I'll be careful. Careful isn't enough. You'll need to be smart and lucky and willing to run if things go wrong. Eleanor thought about the ride from Cheyenne, about the gunshots and the fear and the desperate flight through the darkness. I can do that, she said. She left the trading post with directions tucked in her pocket and rode back to Black Hollow Ranch. Wade was in the barn, shoeing a horse. I need to make another trip, Eleanor said. Wade didn't look up. Where? North, there's a man who might be willing to testify against Boone. Testify to what? Eleanor explained about Daniel Hutchins, about the fire, about Colby seeing Boone's men. When she finished, Wade set down the horse's hoof and straightened. You're talking about accusing Boone of murder. I'm talking about telling the truth. The truth will get you killed. Maybe. But keeping quiet hasn't helped anyone either. Wade's hands tightened on the shoeing tools. I can't let you do this alone. You have to. The ranch needs you here. The ranch needs both of us alive. Eleanor stepped closer. Wade, listen to me. This is the only way. Miller needs proof. We need Miller's support, and Boone needs to be stopped before he destroys everything. If I can get Colby to talk, if I can get his testimony to the territorial judge, we might actually have a chance. And if you can't, then I'll come back and we'll figure out another plan. Wade looked at her for a long moment. Then he walked to the back of the barn and opened a trunk Eleanor had never noticed before. Inside were guns, more than she'd expected, rifles, pistols, ammunition. Wade pulled out a revolver and handed it to Eleanor. Take this. Wade, it's loaded. 6 shots. Don't waste them. He showed her how to check the cylinder, how to aim, how to fire. And Eleanor, if Boone's men corner you and there's no way out, I'll run. No. If there's no way out, you use this. You don't let them take you alive. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Eleanor took the revolver. It was heavier than she expected. I'll be back in 3 days, she said. Promise me. Wade, promise me you'll come back. Eleanor met his eyes. She saw fear there, real, raw fear that matched her own. I promise I'll try. It wasn't the answer Wade wanted, but it was the only honest one she had. She left the next morning before dawn. The sky was still dark when she saddled Bess and rode out of the yard. Behind her, she could feel Wade watching from the house. She didn't look back. The route north took her through country that was somehow both beautiful and threatening. Pine forests gave way to rocky slopes. Frozen streams cut through valleys that looked like they'd been carved by violence. Eleanor rode for 6 hours straight, stopping only to rest Bess and check the directions Ruth had given her. She was maybe 20 miles from Black Hollow when she heard hoofbeats behind her. Eleanor's stomach dropped. She urged Bess forward, but the mare was already tired from the hard ride. The hoofbeats got closer. Eleanor pulled the revolver from her coat pocket and turned in the saddle. 4 riders, coming fast. She recognized one of them, the leader from the group that had followed her from Cheyenne. They weren't even trying to hide anymore. Eleanor spurred Bess into a canyon, hoping to lose them in the rocks. But the canyon narrowed quickly, the walls pressing close on both sides. Dead end. Eleanor pulled Bess to a stop and turned to face the riders. The revolver felt impossibly heavy in her hand. The 4 men spread across the canyon entrance, blocking her escape. The leader walked his horse forward. He was smiling. "Well now," he said. "Looks like you're having a bad day." Eleanor raised the revolver. "Stay back." "Or what? You'll shoot me?" He laughed. "You didn't shoot anyone in Cheyenne. You're not going to start now." "You don't know that." "Sure I do. I can see it in your eyes. You're scared. And scared, people hesitate." Eleanor's hand was shaking. She tried to steady it, but fear had locked her muscles tight. The leader dismounted and walked toward her. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to put down that gun and come with us. Boone wants to talk to you." "I'm not going anywhere with you." "That's not really up to you anymore." He was 10 feet away, then 5. Eleanor pulled the trigger. The shot went wide, not because she was trying to miss, but because her hand jerked at the last second. The bullet hit rock somewhere behind the man's head. He didn't even flinch. "See," he said, "you can't do it." He lunged forward and grabbed the revolver. Eleanor tried to hold on, but he was stronger. He ripped the gun from her hand and backhanded her across the face. Eleanor hit the ground hard. Her vision went white with pain. When it cleared, all 4 men were standing over her. "Tie her up," the leader said. "Boone's waiting." They dragged Eleanor to her feet and bound her hands behind her back. One of them took Bess's reins. Another shoved Eleanor toward a horse. "Get on!" Eleanor's face was throbbing. She could taste blood, but she climbed onto the horse because there was no other choice. They rode for what felt like hours. By the time they stopped, the sun was setting and Eleanor had no idea where she was. They were at a ranch, bigger than Wade's, better maintained. Expensive buildings, good fences, everything that money and violence could buy. Boone's ranch. They pulled Eleanor off the horse and dragged her into the main house. Inside, a fire burned in a massive fireplace, expensive furniture, imported rugs, all the trappings of wealth built on other people's suffering. Silas Boone sat in a leather chair near the fire, holding a glass of whiskey. He looked up when Eleanor was brought in. "Ah," he said, "the widow Hayes. We finally meet properly." Eleanor didn't speak. Boone gestured to his men. "Untie her hands. I'm not a barbarian." They cut the ropes. Eleanor's wrists were raw and bleeding. Boone stood and walked over to a table where a decanter sat. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey and offered one to Eleanor. "Drink. You look like you need it." Eleanor knocked the glass out of his hand. It shattered on the floor. Boone laughed. "Good. I was hoping you'd have some fight left." "What do you want?" "To talk. That's all. Just a conversation between neighbors." "We're not neighbors. You're a thief and a murderer, and I'm trying to stop you." "See, that's where you're wrong. I'm a businessman. Everything I've done, every ranch I've bought, every deal I've made, it's all been legal and proper." "You burned Daniel Hutchins' house with him inside." Boone's expression didn't change. "Daniel Hutchins died in an accident. That's what the sheriff's report says." "Because you paid the sheriff to say it." "I donated to his campaign. That's not the same thing." Boone walked back to his chair and sat down. "But let's say, just for argument's sake, that I did have something to do with Daniel's death. What are you going to do about it? Who's going to believe you? A widow who's been here less than 2 months? People will believe evidence, testimony from witnesses. Witnesses can be convinced to forget what they saw, or they can have accidents of their own. Boone sipped his whiskey. You're playing a game you don't understand, Eleanor. This valley belongs to me. Every person in it answers to me, including Wade Mercer. Wade will never answer to you. He will, when he doesn't have a choice. When his cattle are dead and his ranch is in foreclosure and you're Boone paused. Well, let's just say I have plans for you. Eleanor felt ice spreading through her veins. If you hurt me, Wade will kill you. Wade will try, and he'll fail, just like everyone else who's tried to stand against me. Boone set down his glass. But I didn't bring you here to threaten you. I brought you here to make you an offer. I'm not interested. You haven't heard it yet. I don't need to. Boone stood and walked to the window. Leave, tonight. Take your children and disappear. I'll even give you money for the journey, enough to start over somewhere else. And Wade? Wade can stay or go. I don't care, but without you there to prop him up, he'll collapse within a month. The ranch will be mine, and this valley will finally have the peace it deserves. Eleanor laughed, sharp and bitter. You think I'm the only thing keeping Wade fighting? You're wrong. He was fighting long before I arrived, and he'll keep fighting long after I'm gone. Maybe, but you've given him something dangerous, hope, and hope makes people reckless. Boone turned to face her. I'm trying to save your life, Eleanor. Take the offer. No. Then you're a fool. Probably. But I'm a fool with nothing left to lose. And that makes me more dangerous than you think. Boone studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded to his men. Take her to the root cellar. Lock her in. We'll deal with her in the morning. They grabbed Eleanor's arms and dragged her outside. Behind the house, a cellar door was built into the ground. They opened it and shoved Eleanor inside. She fell down wooden steps and landed hard on a dirt floor. Above her, the door slammed shut. She heard a lock click into place. Darkness. Complete and absolute darkness. Eleanor sat up slowly, feeling for injuries. Her shoulder hurt where she'd landed. Her face was still throbbing from where Boone's man had hit her, but she was alive. She felt along the walls, trying to orient herself. The cellar was maybe 10 feet square. Stone walls, dirt floor, no windows. The only exit was the locked door above. Eleanor tried the door anyway, pushing against it with all her strength. It didn't budge. She was trapped. Eleanor sank down onto the floor and tried not to panic. Tried to think. Wade didn't know where she was. By the time he realized she was missing, it might be too late. Unless she could find a way out. Eleanor felt along the walls again, this time searching for weaknesses. Loose stones, gaps, anything she could use. Her fingers found something. Not a gap, but a tool. A rusted shovel leaning against the far wall. Eleanor's mind raced. The floor was dirt. If she could dig under the door, create a space large enough to crawl through. It would take hours, maybe all night. But it was the only chance she had. Eleanor grabbed the shovel and started digging. The ground was frozen hard. Every strike of the shovel sent pain shooting through her injured shoulder. But Eleanor kept digging, kept carving out dirt inch by inch. Hours passed. Eleanor's hands were bleeding. Her shoulder felt like it was on fire, but the hole was getting bigger. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Eleanor had created a space large enough to crawl through. She wedged herself under the door, scraping skin off her back as she squeezed through the narrow gap. Then she was outside. The sky was dark. Stars scattered overhead. Eleanor could see the main house maybe 50 yards away. Lights in the windows. She needed to move, fast. Eleanor ran toward the barn, staying low. Inside, she found Bess tied to a post. The other horses were there too, Boone's expensive stock, worth more than everything Eleanor owned. An idea formed. Eleanor opened every stall, let every horse loose. Then she grabbed a lantern from the wall and smashed it on the ground. Fire spread through the hay. Eleanor mounted Bess and rode out of the barn as flames climbed the walls behind her. Behind her, men were shouting, running, trying to save the horses and put out the fire. Eleanor didn't look back. She just rode as hard as she could into the darkness. She rode through the night, following instinct more than memory. By the time dawn broke, she was exhausted and lost but still alive. She found the main road and followed it south, toward Black Hollow, toward home. By mid-morning, she saw familiar landmarks. The canyon, the frozen creek, the rough track leading to Wade's ranch. Eleanor rode into the yard and nearly fell off Bess. Wade caught her. What happened? His voice was raw with fear and anger. Eleanor told him everything. Boone's men, the ranch, the cellar, the fire. When she finished, Wade was shaking. "I'm going to kill him," he said quietly. "No, we're going to destroy him, legally, properly, so he can't hurt anyone ever again." "How?" Eleanor pulled out the directions Ruth had given her. They were crumpled and dirty, but still readable. "I'm going to find Colby. I'm going to get his testimony. And then I'm going to make sure everyone in this territory knows exactly what Silas Boone is." Wade stared at her. "You're serious?" "Yes." "Eleanor, you almost died last night. You were locked in a cellar and had to dig your way out. Most people would be running the other direction." "I'm not most people." Wade pulled her close. Eleanor felt his heart hammering against her chest. "Don't ever scare me like that again," he whispered. "I can't promise that." "Then promise you'll come back every time, no matter what." Eleanor thought about the promise she'd made before leaving, the one about trying. This time she meant it. "I promise." Eleanor slept for 12 hours straight. When she woke, her entire body felt like it had been beaten with rocks. Her hands were bandaged, her face was swollen. But she was alive. Clara was sitting beside the bed, watching her with those two serious eyes. "Mama?" "I'm all right, sweetheart." "You don't look all right." Eleanor almost laughed. "No, I suppose I don't." Thomas appeared in the doorway. "Wade says you're going after that man, Colby." "Yes." "When?" "Tomorrow, as soon as I can ride." Thomas's jaw tightened. He looked so much like his father in that moment, stubborn and scared in equal measure. "I want to come with you." "No." "Why not? You said we all had to pull our weight. I can help." "Thomas, listen to me." Eleanor sat up, ignoring the pain. "What I'm doing is dangerous. If something goes wrong, I need to know you and Clara are safe. Can you do that for me? Can you stay here and protect your sister?" Thomas looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he nodded. "Good boy." Eleanor got out of bed and went downstairs. Wade was in the kitchen with Garrett, both of them bent over a map spread across the table. "You should still be resting," Wade said without looking up. "I've rested enough. What are you planning?" Wade pointed to a spot on the map. "The ranch where Colby's working is here, 40 miles north, just like Ruth said. But the route goes through some rough country." "I know. I was just there. Which is why I'm coming with you this time." Eleanor shook her head. "We already talked about this. Things changed when Boone kidnapped you. He knows you're coming for him now. He'll be ready." Wade's voice was flat, final. "I'm not letting you ride into that alone." Garrett cleared his throat. "I could stay here with the kids. Charlie and Pete can handle the ranch for a few days." Eleanor wanted to argue, wanted to say she could do this herself, but the memory of that cellar, the darkness, the fear, the certainty that she might die there, was too fresh. "All right," she said, "but we leave at dawn, and we don't stop until we find Colby." They left the next morning with the sky still dark. Eleanor's body protested every movement, but she ignored it. Pain was just information. It told her she was still alive. Wade rode beside her in silence. He'd barely spoken since yesterday, and Eleanor could feel anger radiating off him like heat. "You're mad at me," she said after they'd been riding for an hour. "I'm mad at myself." "Why?" "Because I let you go alone. Because I should have known Boone would pull something like that." "You couldn't have known." "I should have." Wade's hands tightened on the reins. "I've been fighting him for years. I know how he thinks, and I still let you walk into it." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "You know what I learned being locked in that cellar?" "What?" "That I'm tougher than I thought, that I can survive things I didn't think I could survive, and that next time I'll be smarter." "There shouldn't be a next time." "Maybe not. But if there is, I'll be ready." Wade looked at her, really looked at her. "You're different than when you arrived." "How?" "Harder. More certain." "Is that bad?" "No, just different." Wade's expression softened slightly. "David, your first husband, what was he like?" Eleanor was surprised by the question. Gentle, kind. He wanted everyone to be happy, even when it cost him. Did you love him? Yes, but not the way you're asking. I loved him the way you love someone who's good to you, someone who tries even when they're failing. And now? Eleanor met Wade's eyes. Now I don't know what love looks like anymore. I just know what survival looks like. And that's enough. Wade nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I think he'd be proud of you, of what you've become. I think he'd be terrified. Maybe that too. They rode in silence after that, covering ground steadily. The landscape changed as they traveled north, more rocks, fewer trees, everything sharp and unforgiving. Around noon, they stopped to rest the horses. Wade pulled out jerky and hard bread from his saddlebag. They ate without speaking, both of them scanning the horizon for riders. You think Boone's men are following us? Eleanor asked. Probably, but they'll wait until we're farther from Black Hollow, harder to track us back. What do we do if they catch up? Wade pulled out his rifle and checked the ammunition. We make sure they regret it. They reached the ranch where Colby was working by late afternoon. It was smaller than Black Hollow, just a main house and a barn, but well maintained. Someone cared about this place. A man was working near the corral, mending fence. He looked up when they approached. Help you? We're looking for a man named Colby, Eleanor said. We were told he works here. The man's expression went cautious. What do you want with him? Just to talk. About something that happened in Black Hollow 3 years ago. The man set down his tools. You're from Black Hollow? Yes, my name is Eleanor Hayes. This is Wade Mercer. Recognition flashed across the man's face. Mercer, I've heard of you. You're the one Boone's been trying to run off. That's right. Then you should know Colby doesn't want anything to do with Black Hollow, or Boone, or any of it. He came here to get away from that. I understand, Eleanor said, but we need his help. Just his testimony about what he saw the night Daniel Hutchins died. The man's jaw tightened. You're asking him to paint a target on his back. I'm asking him to tell the truth, that's all. Truth gets people killed out here. So does silence. The man studied them both for a long moment. Then he pointed toward the barn. He's inside, shoeing horses. But if he says no, you respect it and leave. Understood? Understood. They tied their horses and walked to the barn. Inside, a young man, maybe 25, was bent over a horse's hoof, working a shoe into place. He didn't look up when they entered. Colby? Eleanor said. He froze, then slowly straightened and turned to face them. He was younger than Eleanor expected. Thin, nervous-looking, the kind of person who'd seen violence and never fully recovered from it. Who are you? Eleanor introduced herself and Wade. She explained about Boone, about the ranch, about Daniel Hutchins and the fire. As she spoke, Colby's face went pale. I can't help you, he said when she finished. You saw Boone's men that night. You saw Pike leaving the Hutchins place right before it burned. I saw riders. I didn't see faces. Ruth said you recognized Pike. Colby's hands were shaking. Ruth was wrong. Colby, I said I can't help you. His voice was rising. You don't understand. Boone owns this territory. If I testify against him, he'll kill me, just like he killed Daniel. Not if we take your testimony to the territorial judge in Helena, Eleanor said. Not if we make it public. Boone's power comes from operating in the shadows. If we drag him into the light, then he'll find other ways to hurt me. My family. Anyone I care about. Colby backed toward the barn door. I'm sorry. I really am. But I can't. Eleanor felt desperation rising in her chest. Daniel Hutchins died trying to save his family. Don't you think he deserves justice? Daniel Hutchins died because he was stubborn and stupid, because he thought standing up to Boone mattered. Colby's voice cracked. It didn't matter. He's still dead. His family's still destroyed. And nothing I say will change that. You're wrong, Wade said quietly. Colby turned to look at him. My brother died 3 years ago, Wade continued. Jacob. He was checking fence line when his horse threw him, broke his neck on the rocks. The official report said it was an accident. I'm sorry, Colby said carefully. Don't be sorry. Just listen. I know it wasn't an accident. I know someone spooked that horse on purpose, and I know Boone was behind it, but I couldn't prove it, couldn't find witnesses, couldn't get justice. Wade's voice was rough with old pain. Every day since then, I've carried that failure. The knowledge that my brother died and the man responsible walked free. Don't make Eleanor carry the same weight. Don't let Daniel Hutchins' death mean nothing. Colby was quiet for a long time. Eleanor could see him struggling, fear warring with conscience. Finally, he spoke. If I do this, if I testify, you have to promise me something. What? Eleanor asked. You have to promise Boone goes down. Not just embarrassed, not just inconvenienced, actually destroyed. Because if he survives this, he'll come for me, and I won't survive that. Eleanor looked at Wade. He nodded. We promise, Eleanor said. Colby exhaled slowly. All right, I'll testify. But we do it now. Tonight. Before I change my mind. They wrote out Colby's testimony by lamplight in the ranch house. He described the night Daniel Hutchins died. The 3 riders he saw leaving the property, the way one of them looked back when the fire started, the recognition when he saw Pike's face in the firelight. When he finished, his hands were shaking so badly he could barely sign his name. What happens now? He asked. We take this to Helena, Eleanor said. We give it to the territorial judge, and we make sure everyone in this valley knows what Boone did. He's going to come after you, after all of us. Probably, but we'll be ready. They left at dawn with Colby's testimony folded inside Eleanor's coat. The ride back to Black Hollow took most of the day. By the time they arrived, the sun was setting and Eleanor's body was screaming for rest. But there was no time. Wade called everyone to the main house. Garrett, Charlie, Pete, even Ruth from town. Eleanor stood in front of the fireplace and explained what they'd found. When she finished, Ruth was the first to speak. You're really going to do this? Take on Boone directly. Yes. He'll fight back. Hard. I know. People could die. People are already dying. They've been dying for years while Boone gets stronger. This is our chance to stop him. Garrett crossed his arms. What do you need from us? Eleanor pulled out Colby's testimony. I need someone to ride to Helena. Give this to the territorial judge. Make sure it gets into the right hands. I'll go, Garrett said immediately. It's dangerous. If Boone's men catch you, then they catch me. But this needs doing, and I'm the fastest rider here. Wade nodded. Take the north route. Stay off the main roads. And if anything feels wrong, you run. Understood. Ruth stood. I'll spread the word in town. Make sure people know what's coming. Some of them will stand with you. Others won't. But they should all have the choice. Thank you. Pete, who'd been silent until now, shifted uncomfortably. I'm not a brave man, never pretended to be. But I've worked this ranch for 3 years, and Wade's been fair to me. If you need me to stay and fight, I'll stay. Wade's expression softened. I appreciate that, Pete. Don't thank me yet. I'll probably run at the first sign of trouble. Then you'll run and I won't hold it against you. Garrett left that night, riding hard toward Helena with Colby's testimony tucked inside his coat. Eleanor watched him disappear into the darkness and felt fear settle into her bones. They'd crossed a line now. There was no going back. The next 3 days were the longest of Eleanor's life. She spent every waking hour preparing for what she knew was coming. They moved the cattle to higher ground, fortified the ranch buildings, stockpiled ammunition and water and medical supplies. Clara and Thomas helped where they could, both of them understanding without being told that something bad was approaching. On the 4th morning, a rider came from town. It was Ruth, her face grim. Boone knows, she said. He's gathering men, planning to ride on the ranch tomorrow. Wade's jaw tightened. How many men? 20, maybe more. He's calling in favors from every ranch and mining operation he controls. Eleanor felt ice spreading through her veins. 20 men against 5. Those aren't good odds. No, Ruth agreed. They're not, which is why you should leave, now, before he gets here. We're not leaving. Eleanor, this is our home. We're not giving it up without a fight. Ruth looked at Wade. Can you talk sense into her? Wade almost smiled. You've met her, Ruth. Does she seem like the type to listen? Ruth shook her head. You're both insane. Probably. Ruth mounted her horse. I'll do what I can in town. Spread the word. See if anyone's willing to stand with you. But Eleanor, most people are too scared of Boone to risk it. I understand. Ruth rode away. Eleanor spent the rest of the day working with Wade to set up defenses. They positioned rifles at strategic points around the ranch, created barriers using wagons and equipment, dug trenches that could provide cover. It wasn't much, but it was something. That night, Eleanor put Clara and Thomas to bed and tried not to think about tomorrow. "Mama?" Clara's voice was small. "Are bad men coming?" Eleanor couldn't lie, not anymore. "Yes, sweetheart." "Are they going to hurt us?" "I'm going to do everything I can to make sure they don't." "But they might. They might, yes." Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that broke Eleanor's heart. "I'm glad we came here." Eleanor blinked back tears. "You are?" "Yes. I was sad before, after Papa died. But now I'm not sad all the time. Just sometimes." Eleanor pulled Clara close. "That's good, baby. That's really good. And I like Wade. He's not like Papa, but he's nice. He is." "Mama?" "Yes? If the bad men come, you have to fight them. Even if you're scared, because we need you." Eleanor's throat tightened. "I will, I promise." She stayed with her children until they both fell asleep. Then she went downstairs and found Wade sitting at the kitchen table, cleaning his rifle. "They're asleep?" he asked. "Yes." "Good." Eleanor sat across from him. "Wade, if something happens tomorrow, don't. Listen to me. If something happens and I don't make it, you have to promise me you'll take care of Clara and Thomas. You'll make sure they're safe." Wade set down the rifle. "Nothing's going to happen to you." "You can't know that." "Then we'll make sure. Together." He reached across the table and took her hand. "You asked me once what love looks like. I didn't have an answer then, but I do now." Eleanor's heart was pounding. "What?" "It looks like someone willing to fight for what matters. Someone who doesn't run when things get hard. Someone who makes you believe tomorrow might actually be worth surviving for." Wade's voice was rough. "It looks like you, Eleanor." Eleanor felt tears burning behind her eyes. She'd spent so long being strong, being certain, being the person everyone needed her to be. But in that moment, she let herself be something else, vulnerable. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Me too. What if we lose?" "Then we lose together, and that's better than losing alone." Eleanor squeezed his hand. "When this is over, when Boone's gone and the valley's safe, I want to marry you, properly. Not because we need each other to survive, but because I want to." Wade smiled, actually smiled. "Is that a proposal?" "I think it is." "Then yes. When this is over, we'll marry, and we'll build something that lasts." They sat in the kitchen holding hands until the fire burned low. Outside, wind howled through the canyon. Somewhere in the distance, wolves were calling to each other across the frozen ground. Eleanor knew that by this time tomorrow, everything might be gone. The ranch, their lives, the fragile hope they'd built together. But she also knew something else. She'd survived losing David, survived the journey to Black Hollow, survived Boone's cellar and his threats and his violence. She'd survived everything life had thrown at her so far. And she wasn't done surviving yet. Boone's men arrived at noon the next day. 23 riders, all of them armed, spreading across the valley in a loose line like they were preparing for war. Eleanor stood on the porch with Wade, Garrett having returned just after dawn with news that the judge had accepted Colby's testimony and issued a warrant for Boone's arrest. But the warrant meant nothing if Boone killed them before the law could reach him. Silas Boone rode at the front of the group. He pulled his horse to a stop 50 yards from the house. "Wade Mercer," he called out. "This is your last chance. Surrender the ranch and leave peacefully, or we'll burn it down with you inside." Wade stepped forward. "I've got a better idea. You turn around and ride back to your ranch, because the territorial judge in Helena has a warrant for your arrest. Murder, arson, intimidation, and those are just the charges I know about." Boone's face darkened. "That warrant means nothing. The sheriff here works for me." "The sheriff works for whoever pays him, and right now the territorial government is paying more attention than your bribes can buy." Wade's voice was hard. "It's over, Boone. You've already lost. You just don't know it yet." "I've lost?" Boone laughed. "I've got 20 men with guns." "You've got what? 5, maybe 6? "I've got truth. That's worth more than guns. Truth doesn't stop bullets. Boone raised his hand and his men started forward. Eleanor raised her rifle. Then something happened that no one expected. Riders appeared on the ridge behind Boone's men. 10 of them, then 15, then 20. Eleanor's heart leapt. She recognized some of them, small ranchers from the valley, men who'd been too scared to stand up to Boone before. Ruth was there too, riding at the front with a rifle across her saddle. Boone turned his horse, staring at the newcomers. Ruth rode forward until she was beside Boone. "You're done, Silas? These people are tired of being afraid of you, tired of watching you destroy everything decent in this valley. You're making a mistake, Ruth. The mistake was letting you operate for this long." Ruth looked at the men behind Boone. "Anyone who rides with him today becomes an accomplice to murder. The territorial judge knows what happened to Daniel Hutchins, knows what happened to Jacob Mercer, and he's coming for everyone involved." Several of Boone's men shifted uncomfortably in their saddles. "Don't listen to her," Boone said. "She's bluffing." "I'm not." Ruth pulled out a copy of the warrant Garrett had brought from Helena. "See for yourself." Boone snatched the paper from her hand and read it. Eleanor watched his face go from confident to uncertain to furious. "This doesn't mean anything," he said. "I've beaten charges before. Not like these. Not with witnesses willing to testify. Not with the whole territory watching." Ruth's voice was cold. "You're finished, Silas. Accept it." Boone crumpled the warrant and threw it on the ground. "I'm not finished until I say I'm finished." He pulled his gun. Wade was faster. The shot echoed across the valley. Boone's gun flew from his hand. He screamed, clutching his bleeding fingers. Wade lowered his rifle. "That was a warning. The next one won't be." Boone's men were backing up now, hands raised, clearly wanting no part of this. Ruth gestured to 2 of the riders behind her. "Take him. We'll deliver him to the sheriff ourselves. And if the sheriff tries to let him go, we'll ride to Helena and make sure the territorial marshal hears about it." The men dismounted and grabbed Boone. He struggled, but they were stronger. "This isn't over," Boone snarled at Wade. "I'll get out. I always do. And when you do, I'll be waiting," Wade said calmly. "But somehow, I don't think you're getting out this time." They dragged Boone away. His men scattered, riding in every direction, wanting nothing to do with the sinking ship. Ruth walked her horse up to the porch. "Well, that was exciting." Eleanor lowered her rifle. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold it. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Thank yourself. You're the one who convinced people they could fight back, that Boone wasn't invincible." Ruth smiled. "You changed this valley, Eleanor, whether you meant to or not." The riders who'd come to help stayed long enough to make sure Boone's men were truly gone. Then they dispersed, heading back to their own ranches and homes. Wade stood in the yard watching them go. Eleanor walked up beside him. "It's really over," she said. "Maybe. Or maybe it's just beginning." "What do you mean?" Wade gestured to the valley around them. "For years, this place has been controlled by fear, by men like Boone, who made people believe they had no choice. But you showed them they did have a choice, that they could stand up, fight back, survive. We showed them. Not just me. No, you." Wade turned to face her. "I've been fighting Boone for years and never made any progress. You've been here 2 months and brought him down. That's not luck. That's strength." Eleanor felt heat rising in her face. "I just did what needed doing. That's exactly my point." That night, they had a real meal for the first time in weeks. Ruth had brought supplies from town, actual vegetables, fresh bread, even a small roast. Claire and Thomas ate until they couldn't move. Afterward, Eleanor put them to bed and stood at the window, looking out at the valley. Wade came up behind her. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how far we've come. About how different everything is now." "Better different or worse different?" Eleanor smiled. "Better. Definitely better." Wade put his arms around her. Eleanor leaned back against his chest and let herself feel safe for the first time in longer than she could remember. "I meant what I said last night," she said quietly. "About wanting to marry you." "I know." "When should we do it?" "Whenever you're ready." Eleanor turned to face him. "I'm ready now." They married 3 weeks later in the main room of the ranch house. Ruth officiated, reading from a book of territorial law that technically gave her the authority to perform the ceremony. Clara and Thomas stood beside Eleanor, both of them smiling. Garrett and Charlie and Pete stood behind Wade. It wasn't fancy. There were no flowers or music or elaborate vows. Just two people who'd survived hell together, promising to keep surviving whatever came next. When it was over, Ruth closed the book and smiled. Well, that's official. Wade kissed Eleanor. It was brief and awkward and perfect. Afterward, they had a small celebration. Charlie played fiddle badly. Pete told terrible jokes. Clara actually laughed, really laughed, for the first time since David died. Eleanor stood in the corner watching her children and felt something she'd almost forgotten how to feel. Happy. Wade walked over and handed her a glass of water. No whiskey. I know you don't drink. Thank you. They stood together in comfortable silence. You know, Wade said eventually, when I wrote that first letter asking if you'd come to the ranch, I never expected this. Expected what? To actually care about someone again. To have a family. To feel like maybe the future could be something more than just surviving until tomorrow. Eleanor squeezed his hand. Me neither. Do you regret it, coming here? Eleanor thought about that. About the fear and the cold and the violence. About the nights she'd been certain they wouldn't survive. About all the moments she'd wanted to give up. No, she said finally. I don't regret it, because everything I went through, everything we went through, it brought us here, and here is good. Here's good, Wade agreed. Miller showed up a week later with another load of supplies. This time, Wade had cattle ready to trade. Good stock, fair prices, no desperation involved. I heard what happened with Boone, like Miller said as they finalized the deal. Heard you brought him down. Eleanor brought him down, Wade corrected. I just helped. Miller looked at Eleanor. Either way, I'm impressed. Most people would have run. I didn't have anywhere to run to. Maybe. But you also didn't want to run. There's a difference. Miller climbed back onto his wagon. I'll be back in the spring. Regular routes. Fair prices. You've earned it. As the wagons rolled away, Eleanor felt satisfaction settle in her chest. They'd done it. Actually done it. Built something sustainable. Something that would last. The winter that followed was still hard. Snow fell heavy and deep. Cattle got sick. Equipment broke down. But this time they had supplies, had help, had hope, and they had each other. One night in late February, Eleanor woke to find Wade sitting by the window, staring out at the snow-covered valley. Can't sleep? She asked. Just thinking. About what? Wade was quiet for a moment. About Jacob, about my mother, about all the people who should be here but aren't. Eleanor got out of bed and sat beside him. Do you think they'd be proud of what we've built? I think my mother would be relieved. She always hated the fighting, wanted the ranch to be a place of peace. Wade's smile was sad. Jacob would probably tell me I'm getting soft, settling down, becoming domestic. Are you? Maybe. Is that bad? No, it means you're healing. Wade looked at her. You healed me. You know that, right? You and your stubbornness and your refusal to give up. You made me believe it was worth trying again. Eleanor felt tears burning behind her eyes. You healed me too. You gave me a place to belong when I thought I'd lost that forever. They sat together watching the snow fall until the sun rose, painting the valley in shades of pink and gold. Spring came slowly. Ice melted. Grass appeared. The cattle grew fat on new growth. Eleanor planted a garden behind the house. Vegetables and herbs and flowers that Clara helped tend. Thomas learned to rope cattle from Garrett. Clara started talking more, her voice gaining confidence with each passing day. Pete decided to stay permanently, joking that he was too old to start over somewhere new. And Eleanor and Wade built something that looked like a life. Not perfect, not easy, but real. One afternoon in late April, Eleanor was working in the garden when she heard hoofbeats. She looked up and saw Ruth riding into the yard. News from Helena, Ruth called out. Eleanor wiped dirt from her hands and walked over. Good news or bad? Good. Boone was convicted. All charges. The judge gave him 20 years. Eleanor felt relief wash over her. It's really over then. It's really over. The valley's free of him. And people are starting to rebuild, starting to believe things can actually be better. That's good, Ruth smiled. You did that, Eleanor. You showed people what courage looks like, what standing up for what's right looks like, even when it's terrifying. Eleanor thought about the night in Boone's cellar, about digging her way out with bleeding hands and pure stubbornness, about every moment she'd been certain she couldn't go on but had gone on anyway. I didn't do anything special, she said. I just refused to quit. Sometimes that's the most special thing a person can do. That night, Eleanor sat on the porch with Wade while Clara and Thomas chased each other through the yard, their laughter carrying on the wind. You know what I've learned, Eleanor said. What? That survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about finding reasons to want to stay alive, building something worth protecting, loving people worth fighting for. Wade put his arm around her shoulders. That sounds like wisdom. It sounds like exhaustion. Wade laughed. Maybe they're the same thing. Eleanor leaned against him and watched her children play. The sun was setting behind the mountains, turning the sky a dozen shades of red and orange and purple. She thought about David, about the gentle man who'd tried so hard and failed so completely. She hoped he could see her now, see what she'd become, what she'd built. She thought he'd be proud, maybe a little scared, but mostly proud. Eleanor? Wade's voice pulled her back to the present. Yes? Thank you. For what? For answering my letter, for coming here, for staying when it would have been easier to leave, for being exactly what this ranch, what I needed. Eleanor smiled. You're welcome, but Wade, you should know something. What? I didn't do it for you, I did it for me, for Clara and Thomas, for the chance to build something that wouldn't fall apart the first time things got hard. I know. That's what makes it matter. They sat together until the stars came out, bright and cold and infinite. The valley stretched below them, dark and peaceful. Somewhere in the distance, cattle were lowing. A horse whinnied in the barn. Normal sounds, safe sounds. Eleanor closed her eyes and let herself feel grateful, not for what she'd survived, but for what she'd built in the aftermath of survival. A home, a family, a future that actually felt like it might be worth living. And as Clara's laughter rang out through the darkness, and Thomas called for her to watch him rope the fence post, Eleanor Hayes, who'd started this journey as a desperate widow with nothing left to lose, realized she'd found something she hadn't even known she was looking for. She'd found herself. Not the woman David had married, soft and uncertain and hoping someone else would fix her problems. And not the woman who'd arrived at Black Hollow Ranch, terrified and desperate and one bad day from giving up completely. But someone new. Someone forged in fire and ice and stubborn determination. Someone who'd learned that the only person who could save her was herself. And that knowledge, that certainty that she could survive whatever came next, was worth more than any promise of safety or comfort or easy happiness. Because easy wasn't real, comfort was temporary, safety was an illusion. But strength? Strength built through surviving the unsurvivable? That lasted. Wade squeezed her hand. What are you thinking about? Eleanor opened her eyes and looked at the man beside her. The man she'd married not because she needed him, but because she wanted him. Because they'd survived hell together and come out stronger. I'm thinking about tomorrow, she said. What about it? I'm thinking it might actually be all right. Wade smiled. Just all right? Maybe better than all right. Maybe good. High praise from Eleanor Hayes. Eleanor Mercer now. So it is. They sat together under the stars while their children played and the ranch settled into night around them. And for the first time in longer than Eleanor could remember, she wasn't planning for disaster or preparing for the worst or calculating how long they could survive with what they had. She was just living, just being present in a moment that was peaceful and real and hers. And that, she realized, was the whole point, not to survive forever, not to never be afraid, not to build something so perfect it could never be broken, but to build something worth fighting for, to find people worth surviving with, to wake up each morning and choose to try again, even knowing tomorrow might bring pain or loss or failure. That was courage. That was strength. That was life. And Eleanor Hayes Mercer had finally learned how to live it.